Welcome back to APAICS Energy Summit. For those who are just tuning in, I am Madeline Milka, President and CEO of APAICS, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our next speaker, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman Dingell represents Michigan's 12th congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives and serves in House leadership as a co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. She is a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Natural Resources Committee, where she leads on critical issues including affordable and accessible healthcare, clean energy and water, domestic manufacturing and supply chain resilience, and protecting our wildlife and natural resources. Growing up in Michigan, Congresswoman Dingell, who chairs the Great Lakes Task Force, has always been an advocate for the outdoors and commits her work in Congress to protecting the environment for generations. In 2021, she worked together with the White House, the auto industry, the auto workers, and environmentalists to announce the Biden administration's goal of having 50% of new vehicles sold in 2030 be zero emissions vehicles. Please welcome Congresswoman Dingell.
Hi, it's Debbie Dingell from Michigan. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, be it only virtual and not with you in person, to speak at the APAICS Energy Summit and talk about the future of mobility. This is an issue that is critical to all of us, and it's critical in the global world. The auto industry, both in the United States and in Asia, is at a critical point. We're at the time where we've got to decide where, how, by whom are future vehicles going to be built? What is going to be the source of the energy? The moment we all seem to be pursuing electric vehicles, but there's other technologies we need to be looking at out there. But what I'm excited about is that this is the opportunity to herald a new era of mobility. And look, I'm American. I'm a Detroit girl. I'm a car girl. I want to keep my state and my country at the forefront of mobility, innovation, and manufacturing. Detroit, Dearborn put the world on wheels, and now we need to keep leading, working with a lot of our partners at the forefront of innovation and technology. And what is mobility and transportation going to look like for the future? We're at a time where we don't have a moment to lose in the fight against climate change either. We all know that transportation contributes to approximately 30% of carbon CO2 emissions, and we have to reduce. We have to reduce that period. So we've got to confront this crisis from all sides by investing in the clean energy economy and supporting workers and industries as we transition. Passenger vehicles, commercial trucks, buses are becoming safer, smarter, and cleaner. And as a lawmaker, as a public policy maker, we have to ensure that we are meeting this moment. In the United States, we've done some very specific actions in the United States Congress. We passed the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, both of which made historic investments in supporting the development and deployment of clean, renewable energy technologies, which includes electric vehicles, but other companies are looking at other alternative forms of energy like hydrogen. What I do know is at this moment in time, we need to be intentional and intersectional about this transition. And this means that we have to be investing in manufacturing. For me, as an American politician, I'm investing here in the United States to ensure that we are transitioning to a clean economy and at the same time keeping our workforce strong. In the United States, the auto manufacturing industry employs over 900,000 workers. One job in an auto assembly plant creates over 7 more jobs in the economy. We can't afford to lose this workforce. I, as somebody's from Michigan, I want those manufacturing jobs to stay here. And quite frankly, I do believe we've shipped too many jobs overseas. With the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're supporting domestic manufacturing of electric vehicles, building out a national network of electric vehicle chargers, upgrading our power infrastructure with clean, reliable energy from across the country, and deploying cutting-edge energy technology to reduce emissions. In the Inflation Reduction Act, we increased investments in both the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Loan Program and the Domestic Manufacturing Conversion Grant Program, which was based on legislation I authored, which will incentivize companies to bring their jobs back home, to keep those jobs here that have been shipped overseas. And by the way, if you are somebody that's based in Asia, but you're selling cars here, some of those electric chargers are going to help incentivize the sale of your vehicles too. People will buy EVs when they know that they have someplace to charge. A series of consumer tax credits, including a clean vehicle credit, a previously owned vehicle credit, an extension of the federal income tax credit on alternative fuel vehicle refueling property, will help bring down the cost of electric vehicles, which need to become more affordable for people to buy them. And hopefully these provisions will make them more affordable and accessible. And the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, also based on legislation that I authored, frequently called the Green Bank, that was passed in the IRA, will provide $27 billion to fund a national climate bank, an important implementation tool that will publicly finance and stimulate private investments in clean, renewable energy projects, clean transportation, while supporting frontline communities and communities that are most affected by climate change. You know, we got a lot of work ahead of us. We are transforming mobility. And one of the other things that I'm very focused on is that there are a lot of people working on technology, and we have to make sure that we give and provide opportunities, which we are in some of these bills. And the work that DOE is doing is what kind of technology is there that will continue to provide the vehicle of the future that has the demand or the performance that customers want, but is also going to protect our environment. And hopefully will reduce the operating costs in the long term as well. Only by working together and by bringing everyone to the table, from unions to industry to nonprofits like APAC, the environmental groups, NGOs, all of us, can we achieve the net zero clean energy economy and a safer, more resilient, and equitable nation and world. That's what we all want. And I am committed to bringing all the players together, keeping them at the table, and working towards that goal with all of you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell. Our next panel is the future of integrated mobility. Transportation accounts for about 1/3 of the total energy use in the United States and for about 1/4 of the total greenhouse gas emissions, and has major implications for energy security and sustainable development. With fundamental transformations on the horizon for how people travel and how goods are moved, there are opportunities for mobility scenarios that can radically change transportation energy use. Our moderator for this panel is the Honorable David Kim. David is a transportation executive with WSP USA, a global engineering and professional services firm. Based in the company's Washington, D.C. office, he guides policymaking that supports federal funding for transportation projects anticipated under the bipartisan infrastructure law enacted in November of 2021. He also guides the delivery of transportation capital projects, including strategic planning and policy, environmental process, funding and finance, and capital delivery. Prior to joining WSP, David served as Secretary of the California State Transportation Agency. A longtime transportation leader with experience in the private sector, as well as all 3 levels of government, David was Vice President Government Affairs for Hyundai Motor Company from 2017 to 2019. Prior to this assignment, David spent nearly 8 years in senior level roles at the U.S. Department of Transportation. He served as Deputy Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, the number 2 position in the agency. Thank you, David, for moderating this panel.
Well, thank you very much, Madeline, and good afternoon, everyone. It is such a great honor to take part in the annual APAICS Energy Summit, and I am thrilled to be able to help guide what I think will be a really informative and stimulating conversation on the future of transportation and integrated mobility. These are really exciting times in the transportation and mobility space. So many things are happening all at once, and they're coming out as fast. The convergence of technology, transportation, and innovation, all the massive new investments created by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, including a whole lot of funding for EV charging infrastructure, the growing movement in the United States and around the world towards zero-emission vehicles, and the fact that the world is changing so very rapidly, including and especially in transportation. In fact, it has been said that there will be more transformation in the world of mobility over the next 5 years compared to what we've seen over the past 50 to 60 years. That's the pace of change we are going through these days, and there's a lot more to come. And the way we move, both people as well as goods, is changing in ways we have never seen before. And so to help us make sense of what's happening and what will happen in the years ahead, we've got a couple of speakers who are on the front lines of this transportation transformation. They are going to shed some light on where we're going with electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and new mobility options in general, and what it means for all of us. So what I'd like to do is take a moment to introduce our guest speakers. First is Jasper Jung. Jasper is the head of Global Strategic Initiatives within Global Public Policy at General Motors, also known as GM. In this role, Jasper is responsible for policy strategies in support of GM's growth and expansion. He has been heavily involved in a wide range of areas like supply chain resilience, manufacturing and workforce development, advanced technology and innovation, and energy and ESG. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, a big deal in the corporate world, including in my own company. Jasper is spending a lot of time these days advancing GM's mission for an all-electric future, and I'm sure we're going to hear much more about this effort. Jasper joined GM in 2012 and is based in DC, but it has also been stationed in Detroit, Singapore, and Seoul, Korea. Before GM, Jasper led communication strategies for the Corporate Partnerships Program and private sector engagement at the Environmental Defense Fund. He also worked for a global public affairs firm and started his career at the White House and the US Senate. Next is David Quinalty, head of federal policy and government affairs at Waymo. And since there are two Davids on this program, we're going to refer to David Quinalty as Q. So you probably know that Waymo used to be known as the Google Self-Driving Project, then was renamed Waymo, and that's a developer of autonomous driving technology. They're based in Mountain View, California. And I should say that during my time in Sacramento, I had the great honor of visiting Waymo and took a ride in one of their autonomous passenger vans, which was a very cool experience. Q joined Waymo in 2017, and before that spent a dozen years working in the US Senate, including as Deputy Staff Director of the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, which has jurisdiction over self-driving vehicles. During his time on the Hill, he worked on issues where new technologies intersect with regulated industries. In 2019, Q was named a top lobbyist by the Hill, and in 2011, he was recognized by Politico as an emerging leader who will change tech policy. Very impressive. Before joining the Senate Commerce Committee, Q spent more than 5 years working for Senator John Ensign of Nevada, and before that, he held positions in the entertainment industry in Beverly Hills. So that is our speaker lineup, and since we are a very small group, just 3 of us, I will pose questions as moderator, but may also weigh in with a few comments here and there when appropriate and time permitting. Okay, so let's dive right in. So we've got 2 major companies here today, GM and Waymo, and both of them are on the cutting edge of vehicle technologies that will fundamentally change the way in which people and goods move. It is no secret that electric vehicles are gaining in popularity, and that's only going to continue. In fact, in just the last 9 months, over 576,000 EVs have been sold in the US. That's a 70% increase over the past year. Pretty staggering numbers. Also, autonomous vehicles hold the promise of completely changing the mobility landscape and reducing roadway fatalities and serious injuries, especially among vulnerable road users. So Jasper and Q, let me invite each of you to begin with some high-level comments on what your respective companies are focused on these days. What are your priorities, and what should the AA and HPI community be aware of in terms of your efforts? Jasper, let's start with you.
David, thank you. And it's great to be here with you and Q today to talk about these important topics. I think this is a great way to kind of kick off the session and frame it up. I think, from GM's perspective, we have a vision of a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And that vision is made possible through our strategy for electrification. We've laid out a plan to be carbon neutral by 2040, and that's looking at our global products and our operations. And we plan to eliminate tailpipe emissions from new light-duty vehicles in leading markets by 2035. In order to do all of that, it requires investment and commitment. And we're looking at more than $35 billion in electric and autonomous vehicles through 2035. And we're already seeing some of those investments, and we're already seeing the fruits of those investments come through. And I think this is how we will bring everybody in on the all-electric future that we envision. I mean, EVs that are fun to drive, that are compelling, and for every lifestyle and at every price point. And as I mentioned before, we're investing significant resources in vehicle manufacturing, as well as supply chain and infrastructure to achieve our vision of an all-electric future and maintain global competitiveness of the US. And so at GM, we believe that we have the best people, the best strategy, and the best technology to lead the way to a zero emissions future. And we are committed to bringing everybody in on all of that. All communities, all backgrounds. We believe that there's something for everybody as part of that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jasper. Q, let's go to you.
Thanks, David, and thank you to APAICS for having me here today. So Waymo is a subsidiary of Alphabet, and we're an autonomous driving technology company with a mission to make it safe and easy for people and things to get where they're going. Safety really is at the heart of everything that we do, and we believe that technological innovation must play a large part in addressing the urgent need to improve road safety. As many of you know, more than 40,000 people die every year on US roads. And after decades of declines, that death toll has actually been on the rise over the last several years. We believe that autonomous driving will be integral to a safe systems approach to reach US DOT's and many communities' goal of zero roadway deaths. So at Waymo, we don't build autonomous vehicles. We're building what we call the Waymo Driver, which is our fully autonomous driving system that can operate a motor vehicle without any human performing the driving task. So you heard David say earlier that we got our start in 2009 as a Google self-driving car project. And we really essentially started this industry. We were also the first company to offer and perform a fully autonomous passenger ride on public roads. And in 2020, we actually became the first company to launch fully autonomous ride hailing to the public as a commercial service. So today we're operating the Waymo Driver in two primary business applications. One, on the ride hailing side, where we have a fully autonomous ride hailing service that's similar to other services you might be familiar with. Only difference is that when you hail a Waymo, the car is empty. There's no human on board. So we launched that service in 2020 in Phoenix metropolitan area, where anyone can download one of our apps and be able to hail an autonomous ride. And we're waiting on permits to do so in San Francisco, and just announced that we'll be doing so in Los Angeles soon. We're also focused on the heavy duty trucking side and local delivery. So for us, we really see autonomous driving offering a huge potential to improve safety, to improve mobility options, and to create jobs. But when it comes to the AA and PHI community in particular, we really think that mobility is an opportunity, equity is an opportunity for AVs to really advance things for this community and other communities of color. I think we all know that transportation, and that's why we're here, is critical for people to fully participate in society. And technological innovation has helped create more opportunities for millions of Americans. But sometimes these new tech-enabled innovations, there can be barriers to access or awareness or to usage for some communities. So for us, we're really trying to develop our technology from the ground up, taking into account equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in mind. One of the ways that we do this is with our Trusted Tester program. This is a volunteer program where people, the public, can join a sort of a beta pilot where they can give us feedback. And we really try to make sure we're getting a representative cross-section of the communities that we serve, pertaining to race, income, gender, ability, age, as well as geography. Geographic equity is also an important part of Waymo's focus, and we want to make sure that we're able to serve all parts of the cities that we operate and provide a rider experience that's the same for everyone, no matter where they're coming from or where they're going. So that's just one example of some of the things that we're focused on right now. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Q. And that's a perfect segue to the next topic I want to explore, and that's transportation equity. This has, as you mentioned, become an important topic in recent years. And when it comes to EVs, concern has been raised that EVs are largely out of reach for lower income families, and that the typical buyer is relatively affluent. Think Tesla, but not limited to Tesla. So if the goal is to increase access to EVs among all consumers, especially those with limited means, what can your companies do about it? And what can policymakers at all levels do on top of the various tax credits, rebates, and other incentives being offered by the federal government and also by some states? And let's also talk about EV charging infrastructure. As a national network is built out, how can we make sure EV chargers are installed in a way that's accessible to all people, including and especially low-income individuals? What can we do to ensure charging infrastructure is built not just in wealthier areas, but disadvantaged communities as well? And along the same lines, AVs hold the promise for massive societal benefits. Can you share, Q, what some of those benefits are and how Waymo thinks about equity, especially in the context of transportation and the future of mobility? Let's go to Jasper to talk about EVs, equity in EVs, and then we'll go to Q.
Yeah, thanks, David. As I had mentioned before, at GM, we are committed to bringing everybody in on the all-electric future. And I think we're looking at EVs at nearly every price point and for every purpose. We were the first full-line manufacturer, to bring in a long-range affordable EV to market with the Bolt EV when it launched back in 2017. And we continue to build momentum in that space, both through our Chevrolet products like the Equinox, like the Blazer EVs, but then also in our partnerships and plans with Honda to produce millions of affordable EVs beginning in 2027, which includes a lot of compelling platforms and models that people want. Crossovers, the largest vehicle segment in the world. But I think, as you mentioned, David, it's really a holistic approach to all this in order to make it affordable and equitable and accessible to everybody. You have to look at the products and the compelling platforms themselves, but also look at what are we doing to educate consumers, to help them understand the benefits of EVs. We recently launched a free educational service called EV Live for anyone that wants to learn more about EVs and may have specific questions about range, charging, batteries, and ownership. Key decision factors, I think, when people look at EVs. So in addition to the products and the education, though, you also had mentioned the charging infrastructure. And really, in order to leave no one behind, we have to ensure that convenient, reliable, affordable charging is accessible to everybody. And this requires a massive expansion of charging infrastructure that must include both public fast charging along interstates, as well as residential applications at home, applications at the workplace, and then also in multifamily dwellings, all kinds of different specialized applications. And both the public and the private sector need to work together in order to proliferate this infrastructure. At GM, we're doing our part by investing $750 million in EV charging through 2025 at the home, at the workplace, and public level 2 and DC fast charging, different levels of charging, right, that will help consumers in different locations. We have a community charging program, which is an initiative that we work on with our dealers to install up to 40,000 level 2 chargers within various communities. And nearly 90% of the US population lives within 10 miles of a GM dealership. So that is an incredible opportunity and an incredible example of how we work with partners to proliferate infrastructure. We collaborated with Pilot Company, which is Pilot and Flying J stations, to install several thousand DC fast charging and create a network across the US. And also working with EVgo to triple one of the nation's largest fast charging networks by adding 3,250, I believe, new fast chargers by 2025. So I think the infrastructure is going to be there. I think we need to keep working together with the public sector to make sure that they're accessible to everybody. And then also, how are we going to help customers find and pay for the charge? Our Ultium Charge 360 network ensures that GM EV drivers have access to more than 100,000 charge points and growing throughout the US and also Canada. And we'll continue to work with all of our stakeholders and work collaboratively to support the deployment of the 7.5 billion in EV charging infrastructure opportunity in the Infrastructure Act, as you talked about, because incentives are important. And I think what the DOE has put forward in the Infrastructure Act last fall, and I think a number of other opportunities, both through the Inflation Reduction Act and other policy actions, I think will be critical to ensuring that we have that network that we need.
Thanks, Jasper. And I think what I hear you saying is that this is a true public-private partnership. You've got public investments through IIJA, Inflation Reduction Act, and a lot of programs at the state and local level supplemented by your company's investment. So that's great. And that's exactly what it's going to take.
Absolutely.
All right, Q, what about transportation equity in the context of autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, I definitely want to speak to some AV-specific equity issues, but I actually do want to comment briefly on the EVs. It's fantastic to hear, what GM is working on to make EVs more affordable for many people. But there are going to be a lot of folks who can't or won't be able to afford EVs, or maybe don't want to own their own vehicle. And for them, we actually think that autonomous vehicles have an opportunity to, essentially EV as a service, using shared mobility through autonomous electric vehicle fleets like the ones that Waymo operates, could be an opportunity to allow more people to take advantage of EVs than they otherwise would be able to. In addition to all the charging that residential folks need to be able to use, because autonomous EVs are going to largely be operated in fleet applications, like the way Waymo is doing. And you can also imagine corporate and government fleets as well. We need to make sure that the charging infrastructure that's being built in this country is also going to support the fleet charger, the I don't say commercial, it could also be government side. But that could be a really significant way to see EV deployment and adoption advanced, is by being able to move entire fleets. So, and transitioning a little bit to the equity side of things, this is also an equity issue, as I think everyone here agrees, is that communities of color are often hit the hardest when it comes to climate change fueled heat waves or air pollution. And AVs or EVs have an opportunity to address that. There's a lot of different impacts that communities of color disproportionately feel when it comes to transportation. Transit deserts is a really good example of that. A lot of folks live just too far away and can't afford to get to the transit options, if there are even good ones in their communities. And communities of color disproportionately live in these transit deserts. Well, AVs have the potential to provide safe and reliable options to those folks, whether it's by directly serving them or whether it's connecting them to the existing transit options in their communities. Waymo actually partnered with Valley Metro, the transit agency in the Phoenix metropolitan area, to study exactly this with a federal highways grant. And we connected Valley Metro low-income users to the Valley Metro's existing options. And we published a report that shows really significant promise for AVs, potentially to serve as a first and last mile extension of existing transit options. Additionally, at Waymo, we know that language can be a barrier to transportation options, which is why we're really focusing on trying to develop alternative additional languages in our app and our service. For instance, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Spanish are some of the languages that are spoken the most in the communities that we serve after English, and we're building those features into our system as we serve communities like Phoenix and San Francisco. Because we own and operate our own fleet in AVs, and that because so many AVs are going to be initially deployed to the public through these fleet applications, there's a lot of opportunities to address issues like geographic representation, language barriers, accessibility features to allow people with disabilities to fully participate, as well as some of the EV challenges we're talking about before. So we really see a huge potential beyond just the safety of AVs that autonomous driving can provide.
I'm really excited to hear about the partnership with Valley Metro in Phoenix. Micro transit is all the rage these days. That's transit on demand. The old version of Dial-A-Ride from many decades ago, except Dial-A-Ride was not on demand. You had to book that 3 days in advance. So that's great. And autonomous vehicles are definitely part of the model for micro transit. Well, let's stick with autonomous vehicles. It was only a couple of years ago when the media would breathlessly proclaim that fully automated vehicles will be here tomorrow and that all of us will be using them. But the reality is that level 4 autonomous vehicles will take a lot more time to reach market and scale. And perhaps Q, maybe you can explain for the audience the meaning of level 4 autonomy. That's a technical term that's familiar to those of us in transportation, not necessarily familiar to the public at large. So what's the status of AVs and when can people expect to see them? And Q, maybe you can tell us what Waymo is doing to test and develop the technology. Then we're going to go to Jasper. And I will add, Secretary Pete had a really interesting quote the other day. He said, technology is not always the answer to everything, but frankly, it would be hard to do worse than human drivers when it comes to what we could get to theoretically with the right kind of safe autonomous driving. And then he went on to say, human drivers aren't just problematic, they are murderous. That was the word he used. And that's a reference to the fact that roadway fatalities have been on the rise, and very often it's a driver plowing over a bicyclist or pedestrian. So Q, what's your take on where we are on AVs, especially in light of the fact that one of your competitors, Argo AI, just decided to fold because they think the technology is a very long way off. That's relatively new news, and I think it took everybody by surprise. So your thoughts on where we are on AVs?
Yeah, absolutely. Waymo started 2009, so we've been at this for 13 years now. And for us, the safety has always dictated how fast we would deploy and grow. And this is an extremely difficult challenge. Secretary Pete has talked previously about how transformative this technology is going to be and how challenging it is at the same time. And he's absolutely right. I think if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle of new technologies and technological innovation, you often have this first huge wave of hype, and I think we've experienced that. And then it's usually followed by the trough of disillusionment, which I think is maybe accurate to say where we are right now. And then that precedes, though, the slow, inevitable, and then sometimes rapid climb up for deployment and adoption. And I'm really optimistic that that's where Waymo is and where this technology is at. For us, we're actually doing this for real, right? This is not a future science fiction thing. There are people right now who can go out and hail a ride by downloading an app in your favorite app store and be able to get an autonomous vehicle to come pick you up. And that's only going to increase in the number of people across the country who are able to do that. And I mentioned in the previous question talking about fleet applications. So I think one of the reasons why we have this perhaps disappointment for some is they had this idea that AVs were going to be everywhere all at once, able to do everything. And in the parlance of our industry, there's something called level 5 autonomous driving. And that means the system can drive the vehicle anywhere, anytime, any condition, any geography, rain, snow, what you name it, it can do that. Heck, I'm not sure I'm a level 5 driver. So it's a pretty high bar that's probably many years, or some would say decades away. What Waymo's pursuing, and most industries pursuing, is what's known as level 4. This still means that you don't need to have a human in the driving loop at all. That the autonomous driver, what we call the Waymo driver, is completely in control at all times. But it's within a certain set of, whether it's geographic or weather or other operating conditions. And because of that, we think that fleet applications make a lot of sense. Being able to operate ride hailing within discrete cities with increasingly larger and larger geographies as the technology progresses. In trucking, where you can operate, for instance, long haul routes on highways, as opposed to having to focus initially on more challenging last mile delivery in an urban setting. So these fleet applications are probably how most people are going to experience autonomous vehicle technology for the first time, not through personal car ownership. So when people think, when are AVs going to be here? When can I buy one and have it in my driveway? It's probably going to be a while. But I think more and more people are going to have either firsthand or know people who've had firsthand experiences with autonomous driving. Our hope, of course, is that it's going to be a positive and safe one in the next few years. I know that's where Waymo is going. I'm really excited about actually coming to my hometown of Los Angeles, be able for folks to experience it there. I can't wait to get my friends and family in our cars.
And then the other interesting potential application of autonomous driving is with transit buses. I spoke at a recent conference about a pilot program we're pushing called the automated bus yard, where you take a bus yard or a bus maintenance facility owned and operated by a transit agency, and with the right kind of equipment, you can automate bus movements in a very controlled environment, small footprint, and buses are typically moving back and forth or within a maintenance yard or through the bus wash. And this is a great way to test the viability of autonomous buses. So that could very well happen in the years to come. And that's really exciting as well. It saves a lot of time, money, and everything else. So that's exciting. Jasper, let me turn to you and see if you have any comments or anything to add on autonomous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, David. And I couldn't agree more with many of Q's comments. I think, circling back to safety being at the heart of everything that we do at GM as well. And there's a lot of opportunity in autonomous technology. And we see that playing a key role in our vision of a world for zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And we've done a number of studies that really kind of substantiate a lot of what Q has been talking about in terms of the enormous societal, economic, and environmental benefits of autonomous technology, increasing safety, mitigating the impact, of human error, just reflecting on Secretary Pete's comments, improving public health. I think, looking at the historical inequities in transportation design, communities of color in California, for example, face significantly more exposure to harmful air pollutants that cause respiratory and other chronic health conditions. Autonomous technology can help address that, reducing congestion, closing gaps in vehicle access to certain groups. That's really a lot of those benefits, when we look at accessibility, improved mobility, and environmental benefits. And I just add that we believe that all fully autonomous vehicles should be electric vehicles. So therein lies the real kind of connection when we connect our vision for an electric future with our vision of how autonomous technology kind of plays into that. And we're working with Cruise, a self-driving vehicle company headquartered in San Francisco, to develop these self-driving vehicles. And this year, Cruise became the first company to operate a commercial driverless ride-hail service in any major U.S. city. And I agree with Q in terms of saying, if we may be a ways off before these start appearing in everybody's homes, but there is an application now, here and now today, where consumers can take advantage of commercial driverless ride-hailing when you look at autonomous technology. Cruise has completed thousands of rides, thousands of driverless rides, operating in 70% of San Francisco with about 150 vehicles on the road every day. We're also partnering, Cruise is also partnering with Walmart in Phoenix, Arizona, doing mapping in Dubai and testing in Japan. So we're looking at a lot of different opportunities here in the US and around the world. And we really anticipate that by the end of next year, we'll go from 150 vehicles in San Francisco to nearly 3,000 across all markets, so about 2,800 vehicles worldwide. And a lot of those vehicles will look like the Cruise Origin, which has no steering wheel or pedals, kind of dedicated autonomous technology products. And we're actively working with our state and federal regulators to bring this to life as quickly and as safely as possible. So I think we're really excited at GM. We're really excited about what our partners at Cruise are doing, both here in the US and around the world with autonomous technology. So very excited about where this is all going.
Jasper, you'll be interested to know that I had a chance to visit Cruise a few years ago in San Francisco, and I was there in San Francisco just a few days ago, and I saw several Cruise autonomous vehicles going through the streets, and that's always exciting. So as former head of the California State Transportation Agency, I had to visit as many AV developers as possible, Waymo, Cruise, and many others as well. So that was great. So let's bring the conversation down to a personal or individual level. Can you talk to our audience about what they should expect to see over the next 2 to 3 years in terms of the automotive market in general and EVs and AVs in particular For example, the price of new vehicles has gone way up in recent years. Are price points going to come down, including for EVs? Are they going to be more affordable? Also, if people are considering an AV, what can you tell them about range anxiety, which is a very common concern among consumers, as well as charging availability? Will range get better? And will there be convenient places for people to charge their vehicles? Jasper, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think, David, going back to your initial comments, I think we are on a very exciting trajectory for electrification and for autonomous technology. I think a lot of the points that Q has raised, that you've raised, and that we've talked about here today kind of reflect that trajectory that we're on. I think when you look at the sales here in the US, we've surpassed that kind of 5% of the market doesn't sound like a lot for EVs, but that's generally accepted as a key inflection point for electrification when you look at the market for vehicle sales, right? Sales volume. And we're past that now. And we're growing from here. And I think policy actions are a big part of enabling that. I think we talked about the IIJA, we talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, we talked about a lot of the policy incentives at the federal level, but also at the state and local level, creating the regulatory landscape, creating, providing the funds, the industrial policy to where we can continue to invest in this and make the business case for it from an industry perspective, but then also making these accessible to customers, I think is really, really important. And we're seeing a lot of stuff happening across the board. I mean, we're seeing EVs, the price of EVs come down. We're seeing a broader portfolio of EVs coming to the market. We're seeing new types of battery technologies come in. And we're seeing all of these efforts to make the manufacturing and the supply chain of the EVs and the batteries more secure so that we can pass on those cost savings and that technology, all of those benefits to the customer going forward. Because at the end of the day, the customer is at the center of everything we do. And I think that there's more options. I think those options are becoming more affordable. And I think there's a lot to be excited about, right, as we go forward. But I do think that there's more to do in that space. And we've talked about some of those issues today with proliferating infrastructure, with making it more accessible to all communities, right? With dispelling some of these myths that there's exclusivity around electrification and autonomous vehicles. These are technologies that can help and benefit everybody and should be accessible to all. And I'm really excited about the trajectory that we're on.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that many members of our audience who are watching this webinar are in the market or may soon be in the market for a new vehicle. And I would venture to guess that many of them, if not most of them, are looking at electric or at least a hybrid. And we're coming to the end of the line for internal combustion engine conventional gasoline powered vehicles. I mean, they're still around, but I think their days are numbered, and I think most people see that. And the industry clearly is moving in that direction, GM and everyone else. So we're in the midst of this huge transformation.
Yeah, and David, I think that's a really good point. Sorry, I just wanted to pick up on the last comment about the transition, right? Like, we are committed to moving to full electric, right? And I think to your point, there are a lot of consumers that are interested in electric vehicles, that may be interested in hybrid vehicles. But I think also what we're doing on the internal combustion engine side, a lot of that revenue that comes in is being invested into electrification. And I think, making sure that that transition happens in a fair and an equitable and an accessible way for everybody, I think is really what we're focused on. And in some places, there's going to be that transition is going to happen quicker. Other places it may happen slower, but I think it's making sure that we do that across the board, and we're very thoughtful on that. I think it's really exciting. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks for adding that. All right, Q, what should consumers be on the lookout for over the next couple of years when it comes to AVs?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think more and more Americans over the next few years are going to start to have firsthand experiences, and are people who have, with autonomous technologies. And this is still very early stages of deployment, and we're talking many years of this technology continuing to grow. I think for a lot of folks, they maybe think of AVs because it's been so discussed as, when is it going to have its iPhone moment, where suddenly it's available to everyone everywhere. And I think people forget, even with the iPhone wasn't the iPhone when it first came out. It didn't have all the apps that had to wait a couple generations. But that's not really the kind of model, I think, to think about how this technology is going to be deployed. You can look at, for instance, the internet itself, or perhaps actually electrification of vehicles. Electrification has been something that's been in development for decades, many years, and we're still, even though it's starting to really accelerate, still pretty early in terms of the number of vehicles that are on the road. A lot of Americans have never even been in an electric vehicle. Same thing with the internet. People were talking about it in the late 90s and early 2000s, but it wasn't an ubiquitous part of people's lives for a decade or more. I think AVs were still very much in that early phase here, where yes, absolutely, people are going to start to experience and I think utilize on a daily basis for some people autonomous vehicles within the next couple of years. But it is going to be a while before the Waymo driver and other autonomous systems are going to spread throughout the entire transportation ecosystem. If you think about ride-hailing apps and taxis, people are pretty familiar with these new ride-hailing apps that have been around the last few years, and taxis have been around for generations. But those only represent about 5%, I believe, of vehicle miles traveled in the United States every year. Now, that's one application for the Waymo driver that we're focused on. And obviously, it's a long ways to go for there. But we think the Waymo driver can be applied in really almost any type of driving on our roads. So it's going to take a while for that to expand over the years. But in the next couple of years, depending on where you live, there's a pretty good chance you might be able to hail a ride through the Waymo app or other companies' ride-hailing services. Or you'll perhaps see goods being delivered in heavy-duty trucks traveling down your local highways. We're really excited about that, and everything that we're doing, we're focused on safety and complying with the laws and regulations of both the federal government and the communities that we're operating in.
And a related topic, but we don't have time to get into it here, is urban air mobility and the notion of flying taxis. We can spend a whole afternoon talking about that. We'll save that for some other time. All right, so in the time remaining, any final thoughts from both of you? Anything you'd like the AA-NHPI community to know about when it comes to the future of transportation electrification as well as automation? What should they take away from this conversation? Jasper, let's start with you.
Thanks, David. I mean, I would say just, to go back and to reemphasize that we're all in on this electric future, and we really believe in this, everybody in on this vision for electrification, and the AA-NHPI community is a big part of that. It's, we're looking at the investments to make this technology accessible and affordable for everybody. I think it's both through how we operate our business, but then how we engage in communities. I think we have different things that we do to invest in the communities, to invest in our products, right? Everything from the Climate Equity Fund that we have now to go in and look for ways to bring communities of color, disadvantaged communities along for this EV ride, I think are as important as all the investments that we're making, if not more important than the investments that we're making in the technologies themselves. I think every community has a role to play in this, and every community has a benefit. So we look forward to bringing everybody in on this. Thank you.
Excellent. Q, your thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple of last points. I've obviously talked about the potential of autonomous vehicles to benefit road safety, to improve transportation equity, and I touched a little bit on how it can improve accessibility. But I really want to emphasize that we're really still in the early process of this. There's a lot of driver assist technologies on the road today that use automation to help human drivers. But for us, we really believe that the only way to really achieve the safety gains that at least Waymo wants to see is to really use that technological innovation to take the human out of the driving loop. And that's what we're working on. And no one has ever done this before. And not just the technology, but also figuring out how to build a business around those technologies in order to be able to bring those benefits of safety, of equity, of accessibility to people across the country while the technology continues to advance and continues to develop. For us, the only way we can do that is if we're working with partners to get feedback about how this technology is being used, how it can benefit people. So we work with partners like APAICS, like the Foundation for Blind Children, United Cerebral Palsy Association, people like that to try to give us that feedback, because without that, we will not be able to both achieve our safety goals, nor be able to develop the technology to be offered in a way that people can truly benefit from this. So, I think hopefully people will recognize that while this technology is real, it is providing safety and mobility benefits, that it is a long road that we're on, pun intended. But we're really looking forward to continuing the discussion with this community, as well as others throughout the country. So thank you very much.
Well, it is clearly an evolution and not a revolution, and it takes time, but everyone is moving in the right direction. And what I find really exciting about everything we're talking about is that all of these efforts will do so much to advance mobility options, equity, safety, sustainability, climate-friendly options. And so clearly, your companies are part of the solution. The AANHPI community is part of the solution, and they will continue to be a big part of the solution as consumers, as leaders in the world in which we live. And so there is so much to be excited about as we look to the future. And so what a great conversation. We've just touched the surface. There's so much more we can talk about, but our time is limited. And I do want to thank our excellent panelists, Jasper Jung of General Motors, David Quinalty, or Q, of Waymo. What a great conversation. Thanks to both of you. Thanks to APAICS for hosting this conversation. And hope you have a great rest of the afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.